Hey y'all, it's me, Cindy Fessler, your fellow Christian warrior, here to help you know more so you can share more and grow more of God's kingdom. So, if y'all haven't already done this, you know what to do. Please make sure to smack that bell and subscribe button so that more people can see this video. More Christians can know how to share their faith with others. Thanks so much. In learning about the Bible, there's so many fascinating aspects to it. And let's talk about who actually wrote it, right? That would uncover some of the mystery when people confront you on the authenticity of it. So let's talk a little bit about the 35 authors who wrote the Bible. This is from an article by Jeffrey Krantz. Okay, authors of the Bible. So, if you've ever been asked by your pastor or Sunday school teacher who wrote the Bible, you probably, if you've ever asked them who wrote the Bible, you probably got one of two responses. God wrote the Bible. The Holy Spirit moved prophets like Moses and the apostles like Paul to write about God's relationship to the world. And that is in 1 Timothy 3:16, 2 Peter 1:20 through 21. Also, you might hear about 40 people wrote the Bible. The individual books were written by many authors over many years in many places to many different people groups. Very, very cool, right? In a way, both of these answers are true, right? But by now, you're probably looking for a little more detail about the authors of the Bible, and rightly so. When you're studying a book or a passage in the Bible, it's pretty important to know who wrote it. But there's a lot of nuance that goes into answering this question. The Bible didn't fall out of heaven, and it was a long time in the making. That's actually one of the things that's cool about it. So let's take a closer look at the people whom tradition says wrote the Bible. Before we jump into the list of names, let me throw out a few disclaimers. This is a list of authors either identified in the Bible's text itself or generally assumed by church and Jewish tradition. I've included a few candidates for anonymous works like Moses, Ezra, and Matthew. There are more authors of the Bible than the 35 I've listed here. For example, somebody wrote Judges, but we don't know who. There really were about 40, right? 40 authors of the Bible, but the Bible and tradition only call out about 35 by name. Ancient attribution and modern attribution aren't even really in the same ballpark. For example, the book of Isaiah may have been partially composed and arranged by Isaiah's disciple long after Isaiah's death, but New Testament writers still refer to the words in the book as though they were Isaiah's, and we don't know who wrote Hebrews. So first, here's a chart for the visual learners. In case you just got here is a list of names and who wrote each book. Very cool. And this is also on my website. Link to the website is in the video description below. So this is a long video, guys, but I think it's really, really fascinating. So let's get into the nitty-gritty details of who wrote what. So first, and of course these are drawings, right? We didn't know exactly what these guys look like, but I think the drawings are actually pretty cool. So Moses is the prophet who leads Israel from slavery in Egypt to the edge of the promised land. And he also wrote about 20% of our Bible. Of all the Old Testament prophets, nobody is like Moses. Deuteronomy 34:10-12 states that nobody is like Moses. Moses is a Hebrew born in Egypt and raised in Pharaoh's house. After killing an abusive Egyptian slave driver, Moses escapes the death penalty by running to the wilderness, where he marries and takes up a life as a shepherd. 40 years go by, and God meets Moses in the wilderness. There's a burning bush involved. God commissions Moses to tell Pharaoh to let the Israelites go. Moses does so. Pharaoh resists. God judges Egypt with 10 plagues, and Israelites leave. Moses takes the new nation to Mount Sinai, where the Lord brings Israel into a special relationship with him from now on. Israel is God's people, and God is Israel's deity. Moses writes out the details of what that relationship looks like. These details are called the law, and they take up most of the books attributed to Moses in the Bible, so they call it the law of Moses, right? The first book, Genesis, sets the stage for the other 4 books. It explains where the Jewish people came from and how they ended up in Egypt. The next 4 books chronicle Israel's physical and spiritual journey from Egypt to the Promised Land. But Moses' works aren't over at Deuteronomy. Here's the one who wrote Psalm 90, Ezra. So let's take a look at Ezra, who wrote 1st and 2nd Chronicles and also Ezra. Ezra's born long, long after Moses, but like ancient prophet, Ezra leads a group of Israelites from exile in another nation back to the Promised Land. Pretty interesting. Ezra's a scribe, who's someone who writes, reads, and interprets documents, right? That's what a scribe is. And he's especially well versed in the law of Moses. That's stated in the Bible in Ezra 7:6. He's actually related to Moses. Ezra was a great, great, great grandson of Moses' brother Aaron, which means he's also got some priest blood in him. We see that in Ezra 7:1-6. Ezra grows up in Babylon, but he is determined to move to become a missionary to his homeland. We see this in Ezra 7:10. So he takes a group of Jews back to Jerusalem and begins teaching the people God's ways. Ezra is a key player in the books of Ezra and Nehemiah. He's a religious leader in Jerusalem who calls the people around him to holiness. The Jewish Talmud says Ezra wrote the book of 1 and 2 Chronicles. Yes, there really are 2 parts of the same book, and the book of Ezra. In this case, it makes Ezra the second most prolific author in the Bible. Not bad for a guy you never heard about, right? Nehemiah. So Nehemiah is a cupbearer to the king of Persia when he gets some disturbing news. His countrymen back in Jerusalem are in dire straits and the city is in shambles. See Nehemiah 1:3. Nehemiah then gets the go-ahead from King Artaxerxes to rebuild the city walls and gates, and he takes off for Jerusalem. And get this, he gets the wall rebuilt in just 52 days. See that in verse 6:15. Nehemiah is more than a wall builder, though Artaxerxes makes him the governor of Judah, Nehemiah 5:14, and Nehemiah uses this position to point the people to God. He's the one stationing soldiers, commissioning singers in the temple, and making sure the temple stays clean. Plus, he teams up with Ezra to rededicate the people to God. We see that in chapter 10, verses 28-39, and hold them to their promises in 13, 4-31. Nehemiah wrote the book that bears his name, and he wrote it in the first person. Nehemiah has a very transparent writing style, often breaking from his story to record a prayer that he made to God. Very cool. We can see those prayers in chapter 4, verse 4, and in 13:22. David, number 4. David wrote the Psalms. You've all heard of this guy. He's a shepherd boy who killed Goliath the giant. He's a war hero king who delivered Israel from their enemies and established Jerusalem as the capital of Israel. He's the guy who killed off Uriah so he could have Uriah's wife. And maybe most importantly, he's a Messiah, someone anointed by God to rule the people in wisdom and justice. He is not the Messiah, but he is a type of Messiah because he's anointed by God to rule the people in wisdom and justice. So David is a focal character in the books 1 and 2, Samuel, and 1st and 2nd Chronicles, and the books of Ruth and Kings tell us all about his family. David's one of the Bible's most important characters, but that doesn't have all that much to do with David. He's important because God makes a special promise to him. From David will come an everlasting kingdom with an everlasting king. Spoiler alert, that's Jesus. Okay, somebody may have told you that David wrote the book of Psalms, but that's not really the case. David also wrote about half the Psalms, 73 out of all 150. To be precise, though, the Latin Vulgate and Septuagint credit a few more to him. So there's some questions about how many. Even so, that's a lot more than other psalmists. So the Latin Vulgate and the Septuagint are those different manuscripts, early manuscripts of the Bible. And we'll talk more about those, and there's also a chart of those on the website. These are ones he specifically wrote. You can see that in the chart. If you throw the Septuagint, the Greek translation of the Old Testament, and the Latin Vulgate credits, it brings the count as high as 85. So side note, another common myth about the book of Psalms is that it's the longest book in the Bible, but that's not really true either. So just kind of an interesting note. Number 5, Solomon, who wrote Psalms, Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, and the Song of Solomon. I love these little drawings. So cool. So when Solomon succeeds his father David as king of all Israel, the Lord appears to him in a dream. He gives Solomon the ultimate bank check or blank check. Solomon names anything he wants and God will give it to him. Instead of asking for cash or the heads of his enemies, Solomon just asks God for wisdom. And boy, does God deliver. Now God gave Solomon wisdom and very great discernment and breadth of mind like the sand that is on the seashore. Solomon's wisdom surpassed the wisdom of all the sons of the east and all the wisdom of Egypt, for he was wiser than all men. then Ethan, the Ezrahite, Heman, Calcol, and Darda, the sons of Mahal, and his fame was known in all the surrounding nations. That's from 1 Kings chapter 4, verse 29 through 31. Solomon came up with 3,000 proverbs and 1,005 songs. We see that in 1 Kings 4:32. Lucky for us, a lot of that wisdom is part of our Bible. So Solomon is traditionally credited for authoring the books of Ecclesiastes and Song of Solomon. In the first, he asks, what's the point of even existing? In the second, he celebrates love, marriage, and all kinds of sexual privileges that come with that. Solomon contributes to 2 more books of the Bible as well. He's the main writer in Proverbs, which is the book of principles for making decisions in wisdom and justice, and most of the 29 chapters were written or curated by Solomon. The wise king also joins his dad in the book of Psalms in Numbers 72 and 127. Those both belong to Solomon. Asaph and his family. So this is number 6. They wrote some of the Psalms. David commissions a temple in Jerusalem. When he does this, when he commissions the temple in Jerusalem, he appoints Asaph and his family to lead the worship. We see this in 1 Chronicles 16:5. We don't know much about Asaph except that he's a singer from the tribe of Levi, 2 Chronicles 5:12. He and his family must have been some awesome songwriters because 12 of the Psalms are credited to him. See Psalms 50 and then 73 through 83. The sons of Korah. They wrote some of the Psalms. This is number 7, sons of Korah. When Moses is leading Israel through the wilderness, a Levite named Korah challenges Moses' leadership. That doesn't end well. The earth swallows up Korah and his followers, but Korah's sons survive, and they have quite a legacy in the Bible through their music. The descendants of Korah wrote 11 Psalms, and there's a list there: Psalm 42, Psalms 44 through 49, 84 through 85, and 87 through 88. Okay, author number 8, Heman, who wrote some more of the Psalms. So let's talk about Heman. Before anyone gets overly excited, no, a Masters of the Universe character did not author part of the Bible. So I didn't know this because I'm not a Masters of the Universe follower, but there's a He-Man, as far as I can tell. But the similarity name is pretty funny. He-Man was a wise man who co-authored the 88th Psalm with the sons of Korah. So co-wrote it with those guys. He was wise enough to compare to Solomon, but not wiser. We see that in 1 Kings 4:31. Well, hey guys, thanks so much for watching this video. I am so excited that you stuck to it to the end, and I appreciate that. And please do smack that subscribe button. Check out the next video.